Hey, welcome to the BrothaLIVE Book Club. This is Charles Clark. Welcome back, Jimmy Terry. What's up, man?
Man, doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing real good. I'm having problems with this chapter. I'm having flashbacks as we speak. Just thinking about it, I got flashbacks going on. But listen, we're gonna jump right in because we have so much to talk about in such a little time. But for those who did not see last week's, well, we posted. But listen, we are reading this particular book. We are Reading While Black. Let me see if I can get that back. Reading While Black by Esau McCaulley. And we are in chapter 2. And chapter 2 is Freedom is No Fear, the New Testament and the Theology of Policing. And I want to read something that's actually inside of the book. It's a quote from Nina Simone. She says, I'll tell you what freedom is. Freedom is no fear. Mm-hmm. And I thought about that statement, and I thought about that quote, and I thought about he opens this chapter talking about an incident he had with police. I know that most African-American men over a certain age have all had their experiences with the police. And when I teach my class and we talk about policing as we normally do in my African American Studies class, I always bring up this story. It happened a few years ago. That a friend of mine, it was late and we got lost. We asked that he was running low on gas and we made a wrong turn somewhere and we were deep in one of the suburbs. I think Cheektowaga, Amherst, one of those two. And so we said, you know what? I think we need to go back to the main road. So we pulled inside of a business, we pulled inside the business parking lot. And as soon as we pulled in, like 2 cop cars came right behind us. And I said, yo, what did you do? What's going on? You got 2 cop cars. And so went to the driver's side. There was one lingering on my side too. I said, there's only 2 black men, but we got 4 cops up in here. This is really strange. And so, the question is, license and registration. That wasn't the first question we got. First question we got was, are y'all selling drugs? I said in my mind, I said, boy, this would be a highlight. The preacher selling drugs, the worship leader selling drugs. This is just too much for me right now. And so he says, well, then he asks about his license and registration. Let's go check him out. You got some parking tickets that weren't even in Buffalo. Weren't even in the suburbs. They were in Buffalo. And he says, well, I know, and I paid them. I have the receipt right here. Well, in our system, it's not paid. So we both had he said, pop the trunk. Didn't ask. He said, pop the trunk. They were looking for some drugs. I said, my God, this is really deep. We've been pulled over before. I have been pulled over before. Brother Terry, I'm pretty sure you've been pulled over before. But this was the first time I ever got frisked.
Wow.
And I don't know about you, but having somebody else's hands on places they should not be.
Wow.
It was a degrading experience, to say the least. And the one thing that got me out, that still haunts me, I'm going to be honest with you, that I had my keys in my pocket to my apartment, because everyone knows I don't drive. So they're my apartment keys. And the cop, he kept tapping my pocket and he got real nervous. He said, what's that? What's that? And he went for his gun. I said, hey, wait, those are my apartment keys. Wait. You reaching for your gun for some keys? In my head, because you can't say nothing, but all these images going through your head. Oh, you about to shoot me for some keys? Really? Why was the first instinct to reach for your gun? It's just me and you. And you have the power at this moment because you're the one with the gun and the badge.
Yeah.
There's nothing I could do. And I'm short and I'm fat. There's nothing I can do. I'm not running nowhere. There's nothing I can do. And so they didn't find any drugs. They took him in. They took both of us to the police station because the payment wasn't in the system. So they kept him. I'm stranded. it's they kept us so long. It was like 10 o'clock, 10:30. Now it's now 1 o'clock that I'm sitting in the lobby trying to get a hold of people. Can I get a ride home? Blah, blah, blah. And so I had to call a taxi or Uber or something. My phone was dead. And so I had to ask someone, can I use their phone so I can call a cab so I can get home? And I said, this is the most degrading experience of my life. And so there is a problem we have with policing, but again, there's our response. What is our response? And that's what this particular chapter is talking about. It's talking about the Christian response to policing. And did you want to share a story, or you want me to go right into what we would talk about today?
No, no, because aside from being frisked, it's the same story.
It's the same, bruh. And here's the thing, and I don't think people understand. Really, don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying I said this last time we were together. I'm trying to not say this preacher's name that was talking about how we should not get involved. It was right after the George Floyd.
Yeah.
And you're not a man of color, but you have a multitude of people of color in your church at that moment in time. And that's what you're going to say to the people? That we should not speak up for what is right and what is true? That's what you're going to do? Or we go stay neutral? No, you have the luxury of staying neutral. I don't. But anyway, let's just move on, because I get stuck on that real quick. So it says on in the beginning of chapter 2, it says the issue is bigger than you think. And he goes to Romans chapters 13, verse 1 and verse 2. And I was I really tried to figure out what he was talking about. So I really want to read Romans chapter 13. I think that we should do that, so we get a really good explanation of where he is going with this. And so this is what chapters 13, verses 1 and 2, this is what it actually says. And it says, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained by God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. And I said, okay, so we're supposed to submit. Okay. And I said, okay, God, what you trying to say? So we're supposed to submit. And if you read the rest of the chapter, that first few pages, he really explains, because I don't know, in my notes because, I write notes everywhere. I can't help it.
Yeah.
And when he was trying to explain the submission part in the beginning of the chapter, Brother Jimmy, this is what I wrote. When is enough enough? And I wrote, just being Black is being traumatic at this particular point in time some days. This is not a policing story, but I was in the elevator just a couple of days ago. It was just me and a white gentleman. And his bag was on his shoulder and whatever. And then I got on. And our office here is on the 14th floor. I forgot what he got off before me, so it was below the 14th floor.
Right.
And he looked at me, at the corner of his eye, and he took off his bag and he clutched it under his arm. Like I was going, I don't want your bag.
Right.
My hands are full. I got a bag. I got my phone in my hand. I got a bag. I got another bag. What am I going to do to you? You're taller than I am. What am I going to do to you? And so this is just some of the stuff. Am I supposed to submit to all this foolishness? It's traumatic being Black some days. And so are we supposed to really submit to evil? And then further in the book, in the chapter, it says, and I want to read it because I actually wrote it down.
Yeah.
It says we're supposed to submit, but not to evil rulers.
Wow.
And so is that what he was trying to say? We're supposed to submit because you're supposed to have, supposed to obey those who have rule over you. But there's a condition to that, because I wrote here, it says there was never supposed to be evil rulers. So what do you think?
Well, that's good. And because I was looking at that part, I think that was might have been 32, but as he was talking about Paul and the distinction, of us as believers and of rulers, he mentioned one part. He said, "But we have drifted from Paul. Does the apostle have anything to say about how the state treats its citizens and our public response to that treatment that goes beyond submission?" And then he said, "I suggest it being those four realities." He talked about Paul, God removing authorities through human agents, shows that his prohibition against resistance is not absolute. And really what I was thinking about with that is, Jesus told the disciples, said, "What is Caesar? Give unto Caesar what's due to Caesar. Don't you can't come at him with, well, we're disciples and we're apostles, and what you say doesn't matter." So there was that submission that was trained or emphasized in a lot of ways, and when it comes to authority, what I in one sense it's as Paul is saying, where is the line of demarcation where God's authority and who he is separates us from what we think we should do. So, and now that even just saying that just brought up whole plethora of things when it came to the disciples who had to resist, become the revolution. But because of that, they were martyrs. They were separated. They were cut in half. They were thrown to lions. They could have just said, "Okay, well, let me submit to authority, blend in with the crowd, and spare my own life." Wow. So there becomes that, I think, distinction also too, where even what you just said, so we're not going along with evil authority or evil rulers, but we are submitting to authority in lines of those who are watching how we are when it comes to authority. It's sort of like where I've heard people say, non-Black folks will say, "Well, how did they, if I was there, I would have poisoned the master,"
right,
all things that we could have done. But there was that submission to God, and again, that does still become that cycling question: where do we draw the line? Where do we step out and step back? Because there's crooked cops and there's good cops. There's cops that pulled me over and said, "Have a nice day, Mr. Terry," and then there's others who will push every button to make you want to do something. So yeah.
Well, there were two things you mentioned, talked about the four realities. And the first one was Pharaoh in Romans. And the second one was human agents. The third was God is active. And the fourth is speak truth to injustice. And so I wanted to talk more about the human agents, because there's always been human agents to speak to society at that particular time.
Right.
Or as he in the book talked about, give prophecies to the people at that particular time. And he talked about, first of all, he talked about Moses, who was sent to, he judged the wicked nation. And then he talked about Daniel. He talked about Isaiah. And so there's always been those who speak to the time. To speak to that time. And so now where are we? We are supposed to, and I want to go to the fourth one, where it says, speak truth to injustice. It is our responsibility to speak to the injustices of our community and of our world.
Yeah.
And I loved, and I don't know if you remember or read it or saw it, how he talked about the example. One of the examples he used Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Mm.
And he says they refuse to do what the state says for them to do.
Right.
But God rescued them. But if you read inside that chapter, he says, even if God doesn't rescue them, we are still going to do what? We still are going to retain or maintain our integrity and our trustfulness or our truth or our full admiration or our full trust in God. Because he won't do it then, he's going to do it for someone else. And so why is it now that only a select people or a select few people are speaking truth to justice? That's my question.
Yeah.
And here's the other part of that question. Why do we have certain other people and some, I don't want to get in trouble, but people who are not of this particular hue telling people of our hue that, maybe y'all should just settle. I've heard preachers who are not of our hue say, hey, God gonna fix it.
Yeah.
But if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego can do what they did, say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be rowdy about it. We're not going to destroy our community. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to stand in truth and believe that God says who he is. And you know what? He going to rescue us. But matter of fact, wait a minute. And if he doesn't rescue us, it's in God's will. But we're going to speak the truth. That is not right. So how dare you actually begin to tell us that we should not speak truth to power? And that's my problem with the new generation of evangelicals. I just saw them on television a couple of days ago talking about they want to be Christian nationalists. Do y'all know what that word means? I don't think y'all know what that word means. Are you for real?
No.
And then those same individuals are okay with actually saying that, what, we should shoot law enforcement. But yes, I'm a Christian. Huh? What? For real? That's what we're doing? Come on now. I'll get excited. You better take over the conversation. I'm done.
Yeah. No, I mean, when he used that term, driving. Of course, the book is Reading While Black, but he used the term in the book, driving while black.
Yes.
And that that has its own story in itself. But he had mentioned a couple of those terms in there where he talked about how they were trying to be complicit. They complied. That. And those phrases I've seen say that, well, if they only comply, this would not have happened. There's always that aspect. And of course, you're saying it because you have not yet to experience this particular experience. And then, as he said, he said he was expecting an apology from the officers, because of that false, approach. And it seems though that we pick and choose how we want to survive, so to speak. And so there are those who don't step up and don't speak truth to power, who don't say this is not proper, who aren't as the Hebrew boys, as you mentioned, they were like, it's like, to paraphrase, no disrespect, King. Your authority, but let's just let you understand where our values are and how we stand and what we represent, and let the chips fall where they're going to fall. But this is our stance. And back to what you said, where's the church? Where are the individuals? Where are those who can say, this is where we stand? These are our standards, and this is who we ultimately answer to. And in the country that we're living in, that's stamped on our dollar bill. So, that's one of those things where, is it an oxymoron or is this what we really mean? Is this what we stand for? And is this who will protect us? So yeah, there are those, I just believe that, play it safe, but our neighborhoods are burning.
Right. There's something you mentioned on page, you started it, but you didn't finish it. And
Yep.
it says on page 33 at the very top,
Yep.
it says that God brings his judgments against corrupt institutions through
Yeah.
humans
Mm.
in his own time.
Mhm.
And then also further down, it says, again, this does not place limits on our ability as Christians to call evil by its name.
Wow.
But it does obligate us to be willing to suffer the consequences of living in a fallen world.
That's good.
And so that reminds me of something you said. I don't know if you remember this, but we were at dinner one time and
Mhm.
you said something. And I said, oh, that brother can preach. He wasn't trying to preach though. I don't know what the conversation was, but this question has stuck with me ever since I heard you say it. You said,
Yeah.
are we willing to suffer the consequences?
Mm. Wow.
I don't know what we were talking about.
Wow.
He said, but are we actually willing? I said, oh, come on, Terry, you about to preach over here. And we sitting at dinner.
Yeah.
Are we willing to suffer the consequences?
Yeah.
And when you speak truth to power, there is always going to be some kind of consequences. They're going to call you outside your name. They're going to do this. They're going to do that, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are you willing to suffer the consequences? And there are a lot of people who do, I'm not going to name names because that's not what we do, but there are a lot of people who do what I call the talking of smoke and mirrors. They're there when the problem happens, but after after the media stuff dies down, they're gone.
Yeah.
But it's the people in the community. I think that, and this is just one of my pet peeves, that we stop focusing on people who have spotlight and create the spotlight for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When you speak truth to power, you have the power.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that he was trying to tell Pharaoh is on page 32.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I raised you up for the very purpose of showing my power in you. He's talking to you too.
Wow.
So that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. That he wasn't just talking to Pharaoh at that time. He's talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
You have power. Can you exercise the power that I gave you?
Mm-hmm.
Open your mouth. Say something.
Wow.
So that's just my 2 cents. But we're going to keep moving because we don't have much time left.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about policing the empire. That's another section in the book on this particular chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And it talked about, which I found very interesting, it talked about the institutions of policing and how, I want to make sure how the emperor in this particular section, what his responsibilities were for. And there's a list. I'm going to read the list and I want to get your opinion on it.
Mm-hmm.
It says to maintain order, in charge of soldiers. Emperor's powers engages certain activities like taxing and that kind of thing.
Wow.
In charge of the culture of policing. So when you talk about the emperor now, you could talk about the emperor now is let's stick locally. Let's talk about the mayor.
Yep.
He's in charge of what? Maintaining order. In charge of the soldiers. In charge of while he locally he's in charge of appointment of the chief of police. Okay, and they're engaged in certain activities, but they are in charge of the culture of policing.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question to you is, what is it, even after George Floyd and Trayvon Martin and all the other stuff that's happened, do we still, and Breonna Taylor, her people, 3 years later, now they're 2 or 3 years later, they're now being fired and now they've been charged.
Mm-hmm.
What is now, has the culture of policing changed in the last few years based on what we have seen with George Floyd and so on and others?
Right.
Do you think, or it's still the same, do you believe?
I think it's the same because, and I mean, I'm saying the same, but in other words, I don't think it has such an intentional move toward improvement. I think there are some things that just are kept a little more quiet. Unfortunately for them, and for those who at least are against justice and all those things like that, or those who just feel like, what's the big deal? they don't like the body cams. They don't like the fact that there's accountability that's now been set up and established. I think the emperor is how do I want to say it? I want to say split roles, but what I mean is there's more than one emperor policing the culture of policing. And I'll just use New York because if you have a police union, you have an emperor. That's where the culture is actually being policed. That's what's happening. The mayor might be there, but no, as long as you can have a union president walk in and then tell officers what they need to do to get by after a 14-year-old shot and killed, I have a problem with that. But I do believe that that's where that particular power of the emperor is being welded, so to speak, is right there. Because what happened? Where's the culture that says, "Hey, this is we're called to protect and serve, not to and that protect and serve goes further than your personal self,
right?
You wear body armor, whatever, but it's really the point of protect and serve are those that we're protecting and serving. We are not serving ourselves. That's totally against what we're supposed to do.
I want to go back to the beginning of the book with that quote where it says, "I'll tell you what freedom is. Freedom is no fear." That's by Nina Simone. And after the incident I told you about at the beginning, every time I saw a cop, I flinched. Because what you gonna do to me now? Because I'm even now trying to figure out, was or am I afraid of police because of that incident, or am I just now more cautious of police? And in Romans 13, I'm on the page 39, and it said something that was so I want to read it at the very top. It says in Romans 13, 3 and 4, it says, Paul focuses on the authorities, not the officers themselves. He says, rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you wish to have no fear of the authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive its approval. But the problem is, if there is none, does not resolve solely with those who bear the sword, but those who direct it. So we're talking about police. We're talking about police chiefs. In other words, Paul does not focus on individual actions, but on the power structures. So it's structural. It's built in that and how do we know this? So I want to go back. Let's do some history real quick. Back in the 60s, Bull Connor, Birmingham, Alabama.
Right.
He's the guy who came up with putting dogs on people, police. He was the commissioner of public safety. That means he was the police chief of Birmingham, Alabama. He's the guy that came up with the fire hoses, spraying the people.
Right.
Come on. He's the one. And on top of that, he was a Christian. And on top of that, he was a Sunday school teacher. Now, what in the world was he teaching in Sunday school? What was he teaching in Sunday school? So again, if the problem is structural, we have to discuss the structure. Am I correct?
That's right.
And this is why it says that Paul in Romans 13, he's speaking to the need of institutional reform. And then John the Baptist in Luke chapter 3 talks about individual integrity, because in that section, he's talking about the actual officer. Where is your integrity? Yeah. So before you pull your gun on someone who is unarmed, where's your integrity at? Before, Derek, hey, Derek, how you doing? You put your knee on George Floyd for, what was it, 8-9 minutes? Why would you do that? So what is it inside of you that thought that man's life was not worth anything, that you can literally choke the air out of them with your knee?
Wow.
This is this, and so has these things changed? And no, they haven't. Because let me tell you why. Again, I come with receipts. It wasn't the New York Times. We talked about this before we went on air.
Yeah.
It was the LA Times. There was a community in one of the suburbs of LA, and there was a Caucasian woman who was basically terrorizing her people of color neighbors who just happened to be people of color. On one instance, the black man in the article, she was so irate that she was calling him names, and we can only imagine what the name was. And because he was trying to protect himself, trying to hold her off, she spit at him and bit him. She was too close. That's the first thing. Another tenant, a Hispanic woman, guess what? She had to get a restraining order, but they wouldn't. But the police would not respect the restraining order because she called about 10 times. The black man called about 20 times because she would swing hoses at him and everything, yell them out the window. Guess what happened though? She didn't get arrested or anything happened to her until what?
Bring the videotape.
Video. Roll the tape. And that's when police begin to act. And so here we are. So this just happened. This is August 2022. So this is post George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin. The list goes on and on and on. And still, we have individuals. Are all cops bad? Are all police bad? No, but we still have people who have individual integrity issues that won't react because they are not maybe their color, or it's just a nuisance call. But when a woman go biting on somebody, I think that's enough is enough. When a woman, a Hispanic woman, has to take out a restraining order against her neighbor because she is spitting and saying derogatory things to her, and her life now feels threatened, and you don't respect it enough that the restraining order is not even. It's not even validated. You don't even, you don't do anything about it. So she keeps attacking these people. Then we still have a policing problem in this country. We still have reform that needs to happen.
Right.
Because inside the article, the young man says, hey, do you think this would happen if I was white? And if she wasn't white, let's say she was black, would it have taken 20 times? Would I have to have called 20 times for you to come see about me? To see about her? Because you would thought I was harassing her? But flip it, she's white and she's a female, and she's harassing her entire complex that people are and only attacking people of color. It's not a problem. So again, we talked about in Luke 3:14. One of the things they talked about conduct. They also talked about the individual soldier. Do your job with honesty. That's all in Luke. So when preachers get up and say, there's nothing, I've heard preachers say there's nothing in the Bible talks about police. Well, go to Luke chapter 3, verse 14, talks about the conduct of the soldier, which is now the police. Because during the time they were there to do what? Maintain order.
Right.
Charge of the I'm just saying what the word says.
Yeah.
So here's my question, because we only got a couple of minutes left. Again, we only could talk about the book, the chapter, so it's a lot going on. We're just giving you a brief overview. That's what we're going to do. But I'm going to ask a two-part question. There's a anti-racist racism movement going on, and I love the work of Dr. Kendi. But can we just be real? Are we ever going to see an end to racism? And now, are we ever going to have real police reform. I'm not talking about defund the police, and even that is the wrong term for what they wanted.
Exactly.
Defund the police was a crazy term
Yeah.
because when they explained it, it didn't say defund the police. It says just reallocate resources or funds. Let's just be real.
We were just mad saying anything.
Yeah, this we gotta be careful what we say too. People who are calling truth to power.
Yeah.
We have to be careful what we say as well. Let's just be honest with that.
Exactly.
But here's my thing. So, is there ever going to be a point where there is not racism in society? That's the first question. And then the second question is because it's a part of our institutions as well. How we know? Look at just what happened in LA. She going crazy with the people. There's nothing being done until it's on video. Something about, listen, now, when I was growing up, we didn't have videos on we didn't have cell phones. Let's be honest.
Nope.
We had beepers.
Man.
I graduated from high school. I literally, my next birthday is coming up, I'll be 49. So that means next year I'll be 50. So when I graduated from high school, there was no such thing as a cell phone. If it was, I didn't see the big bulky ones maybe. But, that cost too much money. We weren't getting it. We had beepers back in the day. Can you imagine? We had beepers back in the day? Really? 1991. That's when I graduated. What's up, Riverside? So, just think if we would have had that back then. Because people think that here's a thing, and I know we got to go, but people think that this kind of thing is new. It's not new. We got new technology. That's what we got.
Right.
So you gonna answer my question. We're gonna let this go. Do you think there's ever gonna be a time when we can say there's no racism in our society? Look at your face.
In the words of Jesus the Christ.
Okay, what'd he say?
He said, "You will always have poor among you."
Well,
So I will equate that. We will always have, and our writer Esau did say it in there. He mentioned that term. We're in a fallen world, and as long as there is evil, there's the potential of racism. There's potential of bias, and if it's not on one thing, it's another. If it's not on one culture, it's another. If it's not on people that don't like this team, then it's on folks that wear glasses. It seems like it's perpetually there. I think maybe the alternative side or the back side of that question is to ask, will there ever be a time that no one, if I'm not saying it right, that people will not speak truth to power, will not stand up for anti-racist behavior? That's the question. Will there be a point where we're not just standing along the sidelines? You might not have threw the rock, but you were standing right next to the person who threw the rock that hit King in the head.
That's right.
You didn't talk about it because no one ever came to you and said, "Oh, we saw a video and you was in the crowd." But will there be a point where we all speak up? Because I think that was one of the things that came up during the Floyd protests, to start seeing individuals that were not of color holding their cameras in their phones and interrupting and being nosy and vocal during a pullover, asking the officer, you're not treating that person properly. When we all start speaking to this, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. But I think from the standpoint of racist things happening, because they're still saying the same thing. There was a video just now and they were telling people, you don't belong in this neighborhood. And I said, this is not 2022, and they're still saying this. I don't know what you.
I do. The one thing I did get from this chapter, and the older I get, the more I understand it. To be honest with you, as a singer, I'm most known for using the singing voice, not the speaking voice. And the older I get, I realize how important my voice is. And how I should use it.
Yeah.
That we're all given a platform in some way, shape, or form. And now these days, I hate to say it. Oh Lord, I hate to say it. with the advent of social media, everyone has a platform.
Yeah.
No, it's how you use it. That's the thing. We got to do a different kind of show. I got some serious questions to ask you, but it's how we use it.
Yeah.
And so, what are we using our voices for? That's just one of the many aspects of this particular chapter that I loved. It's talk about us using not only using the voice, but also using the power that God has already given us, which is so important. I'm going to let you have the last word, and we're going to go.
Yeah. No, just again, a great chapter, very relevant to today. This aspect of policing, and where do we get to this point of that absence of fear? Like you said, there can be an incident, but moving forward, am I still fearful? Am I cautious? What's missing? What will help us get to that place where we're not perfect, but we're working on it. We actually are making intentional efforts. I mean, that's what I want to see. I want to see an officer make, and I've seen it, but let's get it more to the forefront, that we're making intentional efforts to stop this ugly thing called race.
All right. He had the last word. Until next time. See you next week. Listen, again, be good to yourself. Be good to yourself. Stay healthy. And when I mean stay healthy, that means your mental, emotional, and physical. You need all three of them work together as one. All right. Until next time. Peace.
Peace.